Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Capes and Lunatics. I am Phil. Joining me is Justin.
Woohoo!
And I was going to say pitch hitting for Lilith is Will, but Will would have been here regardless of who was here. Yes, Will's back because he is a big fan. And of course, our special guest for this episode and next, Jason Olsen. I was going to say Mr., but is your official title Professor or?
Doctor would be official. Okay. I don't want to be the guy that has to correct you, Phil.
Okay.
Well, so I'm glad you didn't make me. Yeah, you didn't make me have to.
If I was a doctor, I'd be like, no, call me doctor. Spent all the time in school for you to call me mister.
But we can be informal today. For our purposes, just call me Dr. Jason Olsen. It's fine.
Word. Dr. J, got it. All right. Yes, as I've been saying, yes, Jason is going to be talking about his two. The doctor's going to be talking about his two books, both on the works of Mark Gruenwald. This time, we're going to talk his Captain America run, and next episode we'll be talking about the Quasar run, which holds a special place with me and Will. But yes, Captain America, Gruenwald's legendary 10-year run from 1985 to 1995. And I think I think you said it in this book, Jason. Again, it's hard for me to remember because I read them back to back, so I'm kind of like. But did you say you didn't come to this while it was coming out? You came to Mark's Captain America later?
No, I came to it as it was happening.
Okay.
Back in '85. The first Captain America comic I ever picked up was 307. So Mark Gruenwald's first, which was just an amazing coincidence. I remember going to the store and seeing it on the shelf, and it had that banner at the bottom, dramatic look back at World War II. And I was very close with my grandfather, and I thought, okay, well, he was in World War II. So let me get this. We could read it together. We could talk about it together. I don't know if the look back in that issue was all that dramatic, frankly, but it was something that we both, yeah. It's Cap kind of dozing off on a plane, but it ends up being a really important thing for me personally, because my grandfather and I did read those, and we read a ton of Mark's work on Cap, and it just so happened it was right at the beginning of his run, and so no, I was definitely there. I kind of went in and out. How the 10 years is a long time, as you already alluded to. So I kind of went in and out, back and forth during those 10 years as a comics fan. But it always meant a lot to me. And when I was thinking of things that I wanted to write about with comics, just going back to Mark felt so natural, because those comics meant so much to me. And then diving into this run, when I was researching the book, it felt like one of the most natural, nostalgic things I could do. And there's just so much in that run. And I couldn't even do justice to all of it, because there's just so much that he's doing over the course of the run. But it just felt right to go back to that for me.
Yeah, like I know that was my first, Mark's Captain America was my first Captain America. So I was always just like, oh, I'm pretty sure this is good, but it's just, is this just nostalgia talking? And I guess not, because I mean, a lot of people love Mark's work, and I love the way, like in the beginning of this book, when you look back, because I tell so many people, if you're going to start reading Cap, you should start with Mark Gruenwald's run. And I took so many notes. I'm like, he's going to, how are we going to sell a book? How are you going to sell a book if you're, if we're going over the whole book? But just the whole thing, like when Stan brought Captain America back in the 60s and stuff. And some of the earlier writers were had Cap being very conservative, but then by the time we get to even J.M. DeMatteis and then Mark, it's he's a lot more liberal. So because a lot of that, because I've heard, I think you even say Stan really didn't like writing Cap, did he?
He wrote so many things that I think his heart was probably at a few other titles at times. But he did give Cap a lot of the sort of socially liberal aspects that would kind of carry through in the 70s. And I think what Mark gave, as much as anything, and we'll talk about some of the really amazing contributions as far as characters and storylines, but it's continuity. And that was really something that Mark always prided himself on, and that he really, really valued here, because that's something that Cap never had, was a writer who was there as long as Mark would end up being there, who could really establish that sort of template for what the character is, because we can talk about how there's maybe a wishy-washiness to the depictions of Captain America, and it sort of makes sense because in between Stan and Mark, there were 26 different writers who had different stints on the comic. Some of them were substantial, like Englehart and DeMatteis. Some of them were substantial, but a lot of them were one-shots. And if you average it out between the number of issues and the number of writers, the average writer during that time was on about 6 issues of Captain America. And Mark goes longer than that. So I think it was really important to him to maintain that continuity and maintain that sense of a character over a long period of time. Not that his Cap doesn't evolve, he does, but he really wanted to make sure that there was something that was maintaining continuity and also paying respect to what came before, because there was very few things more important than that to Mark, was making sure that the stories made sense. He wasn't going to start on 307 with a blank slate, not at all. I mean, he changes a lot up in those first few issues, but he's making sure that everything still feels connected.
Oh yeah, I mean, he loved continuity, and again, it's like, yeah, like you say, like he didn't like just throw everything out. It's like, yes, you know, he wasn't going to have Steve stay with Bernie, but he did write her out for a while, and he did just ignore everything that came before. And oh yeah, you can tell. I mean, everyone says it, but I mean, he loved Cap and he loved comics in general.
Absolutely, and he loved Marvel. And so it's so cool to see, like, bringing up Bernie, we can bring up Jack Monroe as Nomad. He had a plan to write those characters out, but he's not somebody who's going to do that in like just off-panel description. We make sure that we get a lot of setup for those things before they happen, and they have emotional resonance for Steve as they happen. His first issue, Cap's the B story. It's a Nomad story in that issue to start, which is not the kind of thing most writers would do on their first issue on a tentpole title. But Mark was not just any writer.
Well, and he used continuity as a tool, not as something to chain him down. It was something that added. It was additive, not subtractive. Yeah.
Absolutely. He makes the distinction in one of his Mark's remarks that I quote in the book. I think I quote it in both books. That continuity is not connecting the dots. It's not just trivia. That was really important for him. That he wasn't going to maintain continuity just for the sake of somebody who's obsessed with trivia to go back and see like, oh, this connected the dots. It had to tell a story, and it always did for him.
Oh yeah, and the thing I love about his writing, in Cap and Quasar, is just you get the thought process of the main character. It's just not like just stuff happens. You get, like you say, the chain bubbles and everything. Yeah,
nobody uses as many as them.
I have to ask about that. It's always been thought bubbles. Where does chain bubbles come from? I've never heard.
They look like chains. They look like chains, and so I like the phrase of calling them chain thought bubbles or chain bubbles. I tried not to go back and forth too much. I think by the Quasar book, I was very connected to chain bubbles. They look like chains to me. So I like the way that it looked. I must have seen it somewhere. Because you got to come up with a consistent name if you're writing about Gruenwald's work, because nobody used more. And one of the things I love about him is it's not just the title character. It's not just Steve or John Walker or Quasar. It's like random people have thoughts that we see as we're going by. And it's like, why would you do that? Because everything in the world is fertile and has potential. So everybody has thoughts in a Gruenwald comic.
And that's something that's interesting to me, because though they've really fallen out of favor as a tool in comics, since the mid 90s and on. You have journal entries. You don't have those today, and I think that we're a little poorer for it. I mean, I know it could be overused, but it's just a tool. Like any tool can be overused. So I kind of miss that we don't see much of those anymore.
I feel that too. Gruenwald's issues were so text heavy, which was not unusual for the era. I mean, you go back and read the Stan Lee comics. I went back and read a lot of Fantastic Four this past summer, and a lot of those issues take a really long time to get through because they're so text heavy. Mark's issues are like that too. Yeah,
I was
absolutely.
going to say Claremont X-Men.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Mark did it well. Even if someone had like a big long speech, it didn't seem like, it wasn't Claremont filling the panel with word bubbles.
It's
so
true.
you couldn't see the characters behind them.
Yeah.
But sometimes it does feel like modern comics. I can finish them very quickly. And that's okay. But I like the immersion that we get from Mark and some of those other writers.
Yeah. Yeah. You would get the full feast with a Mark Gruenwald script. You'd get the whole thing. Yeah, you'd get all of it.
You know everything everybody's thinking.
Yeah.
The character's motivation. You'd be like, okay, this is why this character is taking this action.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cap loves to plot things out. Cap loves training. He loves thinking things through at every moment. And that brings him to life in a way that I don't think happened with the previous writers. Again, DeMatteis, Englehart, others, good runs. I mean, there's some great stories in there.
Yeah.
But Mark really put the footprint on this character in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And even uses it the like humorous ways sometimes, which like aren't on the face of it's humorous, because like, what is it, 349 when he's storming that Arctic base and Flag Smashers men are like shooting at him, and he's like, boy, it's funny how rattled these gunmen get when I do something as simple as advance on them when they're shooting at me, as guys are shooting at them with machine guns.
Right.
It's true. I mean, we were talking about that first issue. Madcap is the villain in the first issue. I mean, he was putting that imprint of his sense of humor right away. One of my favorite examples of just the weirdness of it all was one of the Flag Smasher issues where he's built this contraption and he needs to stop it because the Red Skull is secretly behind it all. And Cap's like, I don't even want to hear what this is about. And then he just starts monologuing. Flag Smasher does about what it is. And Cap's like, just stop. So everybody monologues.
Oh yeah, that's
you bring up Flag. I'm sorry, go ahead, Phil.
Oh no, go ahead. I was just gonna say, I was gonna throw out. It's like, you can see Mark's humor come through sometimes, because like even Cap, who's not known for it, to have like a funny one-liner or something.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Well, but you brought up Flag Smasher, and that's something that Gruenwald, I think, really did well, was give Cap these ideologically motivated villains that were, dark mirrors of him in various ways, which I thought was just awesome. Flag Smasher being one of them.
Absolutely. It's fascinating to look back at that first year, those first 12 issues, because his priority was to revamp the rogue gallery for Cap and do it with these ideological villains, as you've said. And so you see in those first 12 issues, we're doing more work for his villains than we are for Steve as a character. Steve's undergoing a lot of change, as we already talked about. Some people who've been very pivotal in his life moving on. And while that's happening, he's dealing with people like Flag Smasher, like Super Patriot, who are representing these different things that make Steve Rogers kind of have to look at what he's doing. Both of those villains in particular have to kind of make him address what his view of patriotism is and what he's doing as a patriot versus what these other people are doing. And it's fascinating, especially with Flag Smasher. Flag Smasher is kind of sympathetic in terms of his ideology in the comic, not necessarily his methods. That's what makes him a villain. But even Cap has to kind of acknowledge, like, what you're saying makes sense. All the killing is bad. All your henchmen on skis flying through the air killing people is bad. But it's a fascinating thing that he does. And when we talk about Quasar, we'll see that his first year on Quasar is very, very different, because he's not bringing in new villains. He's bringing in a lot of some very obscure villains from the Marvel universe to kind of bulk up who Quasar is. And here he doesn't have to do that with Steve Rogers. We know who he is. But we have to give these different kind of ideological challenges to help us understand what Steve's dealing with and what his rogues gallery can be.
Well, I know it wasn't the first year, but look at all the work he puts into Crossbones.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. He is not somebody to introduce a character lightly most of the time. And these characters end up really mattering in these profound ways. And Crossbones is a great example of that. Crossbones could just be a henchman. He could just be a stooge. And he's not, because he ties him into Diamondback's backstory and he makes him a threat on his own and not just the Skull's heavy.
And I feel like Crossbones was also like the ultimate red herring for a while, because he appears after D-Man disappears. So everyone's like, read those letters page. Half those people are saying, "Oh, it's D-Man, it's D-Man," and ends up not being D-Man.
Yeah.
But again, and I think Mark was probably the first person to like. The Red Skull was usually fist fighting it with Captain America. You bring in Crossbones, Red Skull, as you point out, I think Jason in the book, he's once Mark brings him back after 350, he's more basically a behind the scenes guy.
Yeah,
I
find it fascinating the way he depicts him. As we've said, we have all these ideological villains. The Skull becomes that too, but not as a Nazi. He's like this sort of evil capitalist. He's more, and I say this in the book, more Gordon Gekko in Wall Street than he is the Nazi that we've seen before, which is pretty scary too. He's still that. And so he gets to be this guy who's using capitalism to try to destroy America while gaining from that too. And he pulls the strings on everything. Eventually we find out that virtually every single threat that Cap has faced is because of him. And Mark does the same trick in Quasar a little bit too.
And I mean, and I probably Mark might be the first and only person to do this too. Speaking of the Red Skull, it's like we don't know the Red Skull's alive until 350. So it's like Mark pretty much does 43 issues in a row without the Red Skull. Has any other writer on Captain America ever done that? I don't think so.
I can't imagine. Yeah. Well, it's again that continuity. Skull just died in 300, and that's a great issue. And everything that culminates up to Skull's death is really, really well done. And I think Mark knew that. He was editing the title, I believe, at that point. And so he didn't want to disrupt that, but eventually you have to. And so what do you do to avoid having to use the Red Skull as a Captain America writer? Well, you create John Walker. You do all these other things so that people aren't clamoring for the Red Skull because they've got all this other stuff that's really, really interesting that they want to see pay off too.
Yeah.
All right, I know we're all Mark Gruenwald marks here and everything, but is there a more perfect comic book story than like the Captain stuff?
I can't think of one.
And they even talk about. I was in and out of the Cap run too, but I do distinctly remember one of the letter pages where they talk about the symbolism of the Captain costume, right? The hole over his heart, because I mean it was very specifically done to mean a lot for Cap and in that identity. So it was and it's. I love that story, but I'm also wondering if it kicked off the wave of, hey, let's replace the hero. That they've done multiple cycles now of let's replace Iron Man.
I think the varying degrees they did it. They started that before that story.
Yeah.
So
Rhodey was before. So let's blame that.
Yeah. Blame Denny O'Neil.
That's right. I blame Denny O'Neil for lots of things. Yes.
And again, it's like the strength of Mark's writing. It's like John Walker could have eventually fallen by the wayside. I mean, this year he was in a movie.
Yeah,
John Walker. So
sure, and somehow ends up being pretty sympathetic and likable in that movie. Which is, they had the right arc in the MCU, because I recently rewatched a lot of this stuff, and in Falcon and Winter Soldier, he's really unlikable, which is what he should be. And then by the time we get to Thunderbolts, it's like, okay, I don't want to like this guy, but you're giving me just enough to make me want to do that. But what's fascinating about the Captain story too is not that the Denny O'Neil Rhodey replacing thing is just to sell comics and shake things up, but that storyline does so much for Steve Rogers understanding why he wants to be Captain America. So it's not just let's shock things and let's shake it up, but it's like, let's see what Captain America represents. And what if we put, and this is something that Gruenwald talked about, what if we put Rambo in the Captain America suit? Then what happens? Well, it's bad is what happens. Is you have somebody who has out of control anger issues, and it sullies everything that Steve Rogers has worked for so long. But we're also getting a sense of why Steve Rogers has to be a costumed hero. It's so different than the story that we get in the 70s, the Englehart story, where he becomes Nomad, because that's disenchantment with the people. This is disenchantment with the government. He still needs to help the people. And he grows the beard out, and he spends some time figuring out what he needs to do. But then it's like, okay, let's go. We gotta do this again. And I think that's wonderful, because the Cap that we get by 350 is a different guy than what Gruenwald starts with in 308. And he then has to kind of rediscover how to be Captain America. And even in like the Avengers comics and the stuff that Mark's writing after that, he's trying to figure out, like, how do I be the leader of the Avengers after I've had to do this stuff kind of incognito and under the radar all this time. And that also leads, by the time we get to like 401, dealing with a lot of depression and self-doubt on which is something that Gruenwald was never afraid to depict in these characters. And that makes him seem so much more human. It's easy for Steve Rogers to feel so much better than us, because he does the right thing every time, but Steve doesn't think that. And so that's what makes him so human and real, and Mark got that.
And just 401, that issue, it's an Operation Galactic Storm epilogue. That should just be like almost like a toss away issue. And Gruenwald does so much with like an epilogue issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a good issue. And it's coming off 400, which is part of Operation Galactic Storm, and it's this kind of over the top battle within Cap's mind and all this stuff, and it's great. And then we get to the after effects, and Cap is dealing with so much. And that issue, as you said, could have been a throwaway, but it's not. It gives us that conversation with Tony, when Tony goes into a bar to talk to Cap. And it's silly because it's got all these like 40s Hollywood icons in the background, but at the same time, it's so emotionally effective. And most importantly, that issue shows Quasar resigning from the Avengers. Obviously, the most important thing.
Oh, just in Mark fashion, yes, we see the beginning of the conversation in Captain America, and then it goes over to Quasar 35. And we see Quasar.
Yes.
The second half of the conversation.
I just love that the issue where Quasar resigns isn't even in his comic. It's not even in the Avengers. It's in
Captain America.
Yeah. Well, he's got work to do once he gets back.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So we don't have time for that. He's got to go deal with the ramifications of what happened with the Kree. So.
And again, just Operation Galactic Storm is just like another big event where, again, a lot of people everyone's trying to sell their comics, but it's, again, Mark uses that as like, again, when this not the only time he'll do it, basically shedding a microscope on the 90s comics and the violence of the 90s.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
that storyline. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that storyline gives us that moment where Stark wants to kill the Supreme Intelligence, and Cap has his team of Avengers that doesn't want to. So it ends up being with these deep moralistic discussions when it could have just been a big shoot 'em up. And that's not where it ends up being. And that was a story that Mark designed. He designed it for Quasar, but then they branched it out to all the Avengers titles, and it ends up being, I think, one of the best storylines of that period, without any question. So, Will, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. If I remember right, Gruenwald said that the Operation Galactic Storm grew out of the story that he was going to tell in Quasar, and then branched out to affect all of the Avengers books at the time. So yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. It has Mark's fingerprints all over it, as a giant crossover.
Absolutely.
There's so many great moments we never would have got if that just would have been we all love Quasar, but it's like we never would have got that whole nice 2-page splash by Jeff Johnson of Wonder Man punching out Captain Atlas.
We're Wonder Man fans too, so
yeah.
I love that the Wonder Man comic got to tie into that. I think it's great.
Yeah.
And that's good stuff with Wonder Man and Vision and all that stuff that's going on through that storyline. This is a great storyline.
Yep.
And as the 90s go on, some of the crossovers lose a little bit as it goes on. So we have that.
Yeah.
And just like the summer stuff, like that was even just in Cap's book during Mark's run, the Bloodstone Hunt, Streets of Poison.
Yes.
Yep.
Superior Stratagem.
Stratagem. Man and Wolf.
Yeah, who's going to mention Cap Wolf? Come on, good job. Nobody's going to say it. Come on.
Talk about your ultimate 90s story with Wolverine and Cable.
Cable for one issue. Yeah,
there couldn't have been any more guest stars that Mark probably wasn't that into in that story. It's always fun when there would be guest stars in Captain America that you could just sort of tell, like, he'd rather this guy not be in this. But here he is, and he's going to try to make it work as best he could.
Yeah.
Venom and Quasar.
Oh,
yeah. Oh, that's a perfect example. Yeah.
Which is the first time Venom appears in a title other than Spider-Man, and it's being beaten by Quasar in like 6 panels.
Yes.
Yeah.
But no, but that's the other thing about Mark. Like, he could take, a lot of the writers get these storylines foisted upon them, but it's like Acts of Vengeance. He takes the time to say, hey, wait a minute. Would Magneto actually work with the Red Skull?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, what a good storyline that is.
That's perfectly done.
Yeah, all that Magneto Skull stuff is so good.
Yeah.
And he said, Red Skull strutting out of that clone body. He's like, no, that wasn't me. That wasn't me.
Yeah. And he's got the cojones to give a Nazi salute to Magneto.
Oh, yeah.
He's trying to leave in that elevator.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. I was like, this man has a death wish. He has a death wish.
Well, and in Streets of Poison, we're rooting for that all-American Kingpin.
I know.
Get him, Kingpin. Come on, Wilson.
Sit on him, Wilson.
One of the absolute best visuals ever, which is the two of them in their underwear at Shea Stadium.
Oh, I know.
Stadium, where
Telling them, this isn't a mask, but if you want your guys to touch it, go ahead. Yeah, no, I mean, the wrap up to that story, I mean, we get a battle at the same time between Cap and Crossbones, but one of the big finishes of that story is, Kingpin versus Red Skull.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah.
It's that trope of, well, I may be a criminal and a giant SOB, but at least I'm not a Nazi.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he so knew how to use the Red Skull. As you said, he shows restraint by waiting a long time before we get him in, but then he could use him as a contrast to these other characters, like Magneto, like Kingpin, like Viper, really. That we have that relationship between the two of them, which is really icky. When we get in the hot tub and all that. But this is not something I want to think about. But then he eventually has to cut her off because I'm a lot of things, but there has to be a world to rule over. So I'm not an anarchist. I'm not a nihilist. I need to rule something.
Like
so
you said,
go.
He's like, I want a world to rule, and she just wants to blow everything up.
If any one of her plans works, there's no world left, and so that's just not the Skull's way.
I'm glad you brought up the Viper because one of my favorite Mark Gruenwald stories and moments is that unforgettable issue where Captain America fights Ronald Reagan when he's been mutated by the serpent. The serpent.
Englehart. That's Englehart, right?
No, that was Gruenwald.
That was Bart. No.
Yeah,
I'm thinking of the other one then.
Yeah, Reagan, man. That's the 80s.
Reagan, and that last page, that last panel of that issue, you see Reagan with the serpent teeth doing that press conference, and I remember not thinking a whole lot of it at the time because I knew a little bit about the Iran-Contra stuff, but I was so young that a lot of it went over my head. But years later, I looked back at what was going on. I realized, wow, Mark was really saying a lot with this, and I don't know if he would be able to get away with this today.
Well, we know what Englehart did in the 70s with Nixon.
That's what I was thinking.
So maybe 10 years later, you get a little bit. I mean, it has to be. We have to say it's a little watered down from what happens with Nixon. But it's still, I believe the cover of that issue, does it say, Cap battles the biggest snake of them all?
The biggest snake of all. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's amazing. That whole storyline is just so over the top ridiculous. And it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And again, it's social commentary, as you're saying, Justin, but also in this way that is so silly that you sort of forget some of the commentary that's going on at that moment.
Right.
And I mean, Englehart did it where he didn't call out Nixon. I mean, literally, Steve is wrestling Ronald Reagan turned into a snake. And again, if you're I was a kid like Justin, it goes over your head. But I mean, if you know what's going on in the world, you're like, okay.
Yeah.
What you did there.
But Mark still has plausible deniability on
this.
I'm sure.
Hey, that wasn't Reagan's fault. He was drinking the water.
He was transformed into a snake by Viper. Yeah.
I think that issue, one of those issues, also has that panel of Viper holding like 2 guns, just walking down the streets of DC, just firing everywhere.
Yeah,
like, wow.
And she even holds a gun up to Nancy Reagan's face, and she says, "You're not even worth the bullets." And she. I remember a few years ago I reread that issue and I was like, "Oh my god, Mark Gruenwald was not taking any prisoners with this script."
He did not.
Well, also, I mean, Reagan kind of played a role in that captain storyline because I think Steve kept saying, you know, is this the president's decision? Does he know that the commission has done this? And
yeah,
and he doesn't want to believe that the president had anything to do with it. So he says a few times that I just don't think the president would have. And I think he's talking to Bernie at one point about that. And she's like, I don't know, Steve. And it turns out he's just a pawn in this whole thing. I think we could look at it as Reagan doesn't really have any role necessarily. I mean, because again, the Skull's pulling all the strings.
Yeah. And I'm getting nothing rings more true to life than towards the end of that story when the commission's just like, what are we going to do with John Walker? Because, you know, John Walker's killed Professor Power. He's blown up left and right winger. And they're just like, let's wait for the new administration in January and we'll worry about it then.
That'll be their problem. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's realistic.
That's
yeah. And then they pretty much make Cap give him the old uniform, give him the captain uniform. And Cap's like, you know, I guess, what are we going to do? And that's in the issue. Oh, what issue is that? That's the one where Cap then reverts back to the teenager to go find Bernie's niece, who's been taken over by the camp, which is another amazingly bonkers storyline.
Well, yeah, it's funny because she thinks maybe she's in this camp, and Steve goes through this whole thing, and then at the end, when he gets back, he still was a founder, and she's like, "Oh no, she was just following the the Grateful Dead?" I think.
No, it still worked out. He was still able to solve some things. But yeah. And one of my favorite things in that issue, and getting back some continuity in like the Mark universe that he creates, is that when he's going through files to see who has magic that can revert him to a teenager, because again, that's a thing you do. He's looking through the Avenger files and finds Circe, and the page on the screen is from the Ultimate Guide to the Marvel Universe.
The handball.
And so it's like the exact page from that. Like, oh, so those are Avenger files that we get to look at in the official handbook. That's sweet.
Love it. Yeah.
Well, he was the big guy working on that, right, Will? So I'm sure Mark probably had like it always within arm's length.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was one of his many babies.
I remember I was very young, but I honestly think the reason I wear glasses today is because I read and reread those issues so many freaking times.
I know. I think we had so much so much information about the Marvel Universe because of that. Like I could say things about like the quantum bands that no one would have any idea about. Because Mark cared so much about those details. And you can just see some of the things that he was interested in because he liked sort of the minutia of that. There's that one issue where we see Sidewinder doing paperwork on his big snake bed. He's filling out the forms. Somebody's got to do it, and that's what he does. And there's a backup story in one of the Avengers annuals, is like the initiation of Quasar, where we get several pages of Quasar filling out paperwork and running through tests. And this is the kind of thing that was really interesting to him.
Process.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, stop and think, what would the Avengers actually function as? I mean, what would it be? Because this isn't just a casual little alliance of heroes. This is like a really, really meticulously put together thing. So yeah, they probably have to have an HR department and all that. So there you go.
Nice. The secret life of the
Avengers. Or maybe not, because there's a lot of Avengers who would get in a lot of trouble with HR.
That's true. Yeah.
But again, you were talking about all the villains and all the characters he created. Again, it's like John Walker. It's like even after the Captain storyline, he could have done whatever he wanted with John Walker and be like, oh yeah, this is the violent 90s version of Captain America. But then meanwhile, he has John Walker kind of turn it around and, try to be a better person. He comes from a religious family, so he's trying to get good with God and stuff. So, I mean, there's that story from 383. I think, Justin, we talked about that not too long ago. It's him in the cornfield.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to come to terms. And I said, I love that Mark did that because it's like you see the aftermath of him blowing up the left and right winger.
Yeah.
where like
He's
they
coming to
tried all these
terms with
skin
it.
grafts and like they were just in constant pain and stuff, and eventually they just like killed themselves. Yeah.
It would have been very easy for Mark to just leave John Walker as this representative of a different political ideology, this guy that just was coming from a different background, that just represented that, and then just move on. But he didn't do it. I mean, he wrote a U.S. Agent miniseries to help kind of develop things a little bit.
Really cool.
Mark didn't like to just leave characters hanging there, and so obviously U.S. Agent became a pivotal part of that universe and into the MCU. Yeah.
I mean, again, there was so much fertile ground with John Walker, because it's like, what if you are like Captain America, but you're not the perfect Steve? You're not Steve Rogers perfect.
That's the impetus for the storyline, as Mark said, that he said a lot of people would come to me and say, I want Captain America to be more like Rambo, make him more like Rambo. And Gruenwald was like, well, there's no interpretation of Steve Rogers where he can be that. I can't do that. But if you want that, I'll give you that.
Here we go.
And then let's see what happens.
And then, I mean, his original characters, and then even just the characters he used that were already pre-existing. Like, I mean, he didn't use them a ton, but you do talk about Batroc the Leaper.
Well, he uses him as the last one of the last foes that Steve has a conversation with in that last issue, not to jump ahead to the end of everything. And Batroc is absolutely perfect for that. And in that issue 400, where he's got all those Kree generated, Supreme Intelligence generated villains, Batroc's one of them, but it's he everything is based on the way Steve interprets and knows everyone, and he knows them through their moral structure and their fighting abilities. And so even in his made up world, Batroc has a sense of honor and is the one who allows Steve to survive that. But then he does that great thing where Captain America's like, hey, take off your mask. I want to see if this is real or not. Batroc's like, well, you don't even know what I look like. Why would it matter? It's like, just do it. And then he has no face because it's just what Steve has imagined here. So then he knows that none of this is real. And I love that. And I love that Batroc kind of continues in this way as a villain, but also one that has a sense of honor that's a little bit twisted, but certainly sees himself as an honorable foe. And we get him in the Bloodstone hack, which is some of the best stuff ever.
Yeah,
totally.
I kind of feel like we were robbed, because like Mark kind of set it up in that last issue where it's like, Steve tells Batroc, he's like, none of my villains have ever reformed and like tried to, be something better. And Batroc says something about, maybe he would try just for, Cap's sake. And I think even for a little while, that would have been interesting to see Batroc trying to be like this bumbling hero.
Oh, wouldn't that have been great? Batroc as an Avenger.
Oh my God, that would have had to been written by Mark. Can you imagine? Steve was like, "Oh yeah, Batroc's going to be joining us."
Yeah. Really? You sure, Steve? I don't know about this guy.
Hawkeye's like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
But that's such a Steve Rogers thing to have these redeemed villains come in and be Avengers. I mean, that's his kooky quartet. I mean, that's who he brought in. For these villains.
That would have been the best storyline, Justin. You said Hawkeye. Can you imagine? Because Hawkeye was a reformed villain. But I want you to work with him. He's Hawkeye. Like, really?
I mean, there's so many possibilities.
Like even
sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
it's so exciting to talk about this stuff.
Yes.
How about Diamondback?
Oh,
I mean,
best Cap.
I mean, she is. I mean, a huge, long-running love interest that, unfortunately, after Gruenwald's run, kind of gets thrown to the wayside, and we don't really see her again. But I mean, she is central to a lot of what goes on, after she's introduced in the book. I mean, her connections to Crossbones, like you mentioned earlier, and she does try to do that reformed villain thing with a certain amount of success, maybe.
A little
bit.
And she's such a fascinating character, and she's so different than the other love interests that we've had for Steve over time. So it's a really cool move to do that, where he has to be kind of skeptical of all of it, and he is, because he's never quite sure if he can trust her. And that's such a cool dynamic to kind of play into. And then, even when she's fully on his side and fully seemingly reformed. There's always that little bit of an edge. There's that Sidewinder story. I can't remember the issue number. It's in the 420s, I think, where Sidewinder needs money to pay for his daughter's surgery, and Cap just, I got to arrest you. You're a criminal. And she's like, well, maybe not. And so it's these interesting sort of dynamics where Steve is still very much the hero, and he sees a criminal no matter what their intentions are, and what their reasons for those intentions are, and is still skeptical where she can sympathize, especially for somebody like Sidewinder that she was pretty close with.
Yeah, I know in the Quasar book, you talk about how Gruenwald depicts, his female characters.
Mm-hmm.
We have Mother Superior. I can't remember.
Mother Night.
Mother Night. Okay.
Yeah.
Of course, we have Diamondback, and then we have other members of the Serpent Society. How do you feel like he, presented female characters throughout his, his Cap run? I mean,
I think by today's standards, it's not great, and by 80s and 90s standards, it's not bad. I think is the best way of looking at it. And when I wrote that chapter in the Quasar book, my first instinct was, there was a way to go on this, that maybe we didn't get the best representation. I think that's fair. In some of, when we first meet, one of the first times Diamondback and Cap interact, she looks like she's ready to crash her spaceship, and she throws the key to the ignition down her shirt. So this isn't the most well-rounded character that we've ever encountered. But as she goes on, that desire to change is interesting. It's a desire to change for Cap, which maybe makes it a little less feminist than we'd want to see. But I think he was making efforts to try to build those characters. Compared to someone like Claremont, maybe it's not great compared to some of the stuff he did in the X-Men. But if we're comparing it to most writers for that era, he's making a lot of pivotal female characters in his stories, and that's kind of cool. And there's a lot of really interesting arcs that occur for these. Diamondback's arc is very complicated and dynamic as we go on. Same for her/Kismet in Quasar. I mean, he does evolve these characters as he goes on, and so that has to be a win.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting just the way, using Diamondback and some of the others, like the Avengers support staff, as like the supporting characters, because after Bernie leaves, I mean, Steve, he even says it in that first date with Diamondback. He's like, I don't protect my secret identity like a lot of the, of other heroes. So
yeah,
that's one of the first ones I remember. He's basically almost Cap 24/7 now.
And that was something that Gruenwald really put in there. Writing out Bernie and some of the people that were like in that apartment complex and all that to then move back in with the Avengers is very deliberately prioritizing the adventuring over everything else. And I think prior writers were trying to develop his Steve Rogers life a little bit more. But in this, Steve and Cap are one. And he does that pretty consistently throughout.
Yeah, and let's see, the Avenger support staff, you had Manwolf, you had Fabian.
Yeah, Fabian.
Who, he played a kind of a big role in Streets of Poison, if I remember right, didn't he?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he got hooked on drugs, and he's the whole reason Cap got thinking about, the drug problem.
And he got to present Captain America with one of the most thought-provoking things that Cap's ever had to deal with, which is, what's so different between you and me? You took the super soldier serum, and Cap's response is, well, that's different. ... And then trailed off. And that was a storyline that came about because of a reader letter that was asking about that. Why don't we ever deal with this? And so Mark took that on and gives us, I think, one of the most fascinating storylines that he did in Streets of Poison. And taking Fabian as being the one to present that, dealing with his own substance use disorder.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's probably more complex, but like the simple answer is just, I'd be like, well, it was like 1940 and people had a different views of things. I think they still thought cigarettes made them healthy.
But we've had our retcons of the administering of the super soldier serum over time, that it originally was just in a syringe. And so it's kind of harder to argue with that. And in the initial versions, it not only made him more physically perfect, it also increased his brain power and everything else. So it was more than what we get later. And then obviously later you get a lot of different things coming in, the phyto rays and all these things to make it feel more of a process and less like a shortcut.
And I know the one chapter you're talking about, again, like most of Gruenwald's run, you're saying like, yeah, Cap's fully kind of like in the time period. He's not like not as much the man out of time, but then towards the end of his run, once Diamondback leaves, we get Free Spirit and Jack Flag, and they kind of get that generational difference there.
Yeah, and toward the end, Cap gets a little more curmudgeonly at times. There's a few times where maybe there's loud music going on and Steve's not quite sure about it. There's that wonderful exchange, I think it's in 425, of the kid that steals the comics, that Cap then stops and then talks to both the comic shop owner and the kid, neither of whom are interested in comics for the right reasons, as Gruenwald would see them. The kid just wants to make money. As I think I say in the book, I don't know if stealing Captain America comics from the 90s was really going to break the bank for you. But
it was Quasar Comics. That would do it. Sorry.
That's the one. That's what you mean. And then when he talks to the comic shop owner, who says, "Oh, I love reading comics, especially the violent ones. I'd love to have Punisher, Wolverine come out here and take care of this kid." And so Steve feels like he doesn't have a place in any of this, which is assuredly how Mark was feeling at this era. And so you can see that change in both Captain America and Quasar at that time, where he's starting to feel very self-conscious about what his role is in all this, because the times are changing so dramatically that the characters that he's interested in don't seem to have the audiences that others do. But he didn't want to compromise that. He wasn't going to make Steve Rogers a violent vigilante. In fact, we really doubled down on Steve Rogers' methods with the issue where he has to use a gun and doesn't want to, and that is on the back of his mind for many issues after that. And so it's something that Mark was really determined to do, is to show the decency of his heroes in a world in which that kind of decency wasn't really selling comics.
Well, that's like an issue that always comes up with me. It's like, I've discussed this with many of my co-hosts. It's like, it's back in the day, it's like you could have characters, like I use Barry Allen as the prime example. It's like a guy gets superpowers and he's just a hero because it's the right thing to do. But now it seems like they want to give everyone a tragic backstory. Your uncle was killed, your mother was killed, something, and it's you always have to have that tragic origin. It's like, why can't we just have heroes who are good just for the sake of being good?
Yeah, I mean, and Cap has the tragic backstory, but as I talk about in the book, I mean, he is the result of a science experiment that went right, which is not always the case for these things. The super soldier serum worked exactly as it's supposed to. The tragedy of that is that there couldn't be more, which of course is the good thing, because there's only one Steve Rogers. You wouldn't have had anybody else who would have been able to carry on that legacy, I guess, unless it's Peggy Carter in the What If series in the MCU. But that's a fascinating thing. He deals with tragedy. He deals with Erskine dying, and then later Bucky, obviously. But it's fascinating to think about that there's always some sort of tragedy, but it isn't, And Barry Allen, yeah, I guess his backstory is a little more clear, but Wally West isn't, because Wally West has to deal with Barry's death. And so I guess that's a changing of the times too.
All right, gentlemen, questions? I feel like I'm hogging this.
So Gruenwald was a group editor for several years while he was on Captain America. So he was I think the group editor for most of the Avengers books at that point.
Yes.
So we get to see Gruenwald somewhat unfiltered on Cap, but during the timeline, or during the time that he was writing Cap and then later would write Quasar, I mean, the Avengers had a great a great writer in Roger Stern for a very long time. It was about 60 issues, about 5 years, I think, or something like that. And then I believe it was with kind of an argument with Gruenwald that Stern left, and then the Avengers kind of enter this period of, I don't know how to really refer to it. It's just nothing seems to stick. It's just so much variable, over the next several years. And I find that interesting because Gruenwald did have very specific opinions on the way things should be, but I don't know that it really translated that well in Avengers. I mean, is that just me or?
No, I don't think it is. I think there was a lot of that instability of the writer. If we look back like 300 and on, when Quasar joins about 302, and then I think it's at 300 we're introducing the new team, and it's one of the most underwhelming series of images you could have.
It's the Fantastic
team lasts like
Three,
3-4 issues. Yeah,
but it's the Captain and Thor, good start, and then Mr. Fantastic, then the Invisible Woman, and Gilgamesh. Like,
Gilgamesh.
Yeah, I forgot
and
him.
of course,
Sorry.
And then that lineup lasts about a hiccup, and then you start shuffling things in. And even when Quasar, for example, is on the Avengers, he's not really in that many issues because everything is being shaken up so much. And John Byrne takes over at one point while he's also doing Avengers West Coast, and tries to like add a little fluidity to the lineup and
like anyone can go to either book, and
and then he leaves, and then it's like, well, it's, and then just a rotating lineup, and you get a few that I think, well, maybe not many. Mark writes a couple, you co-write some with Macchio early, and then he writes one where we Quasar has a little more of a presence and actually shows a couple of Quasar supporting cast in an Avengers issue. First time, unlike the only time that those characters appear anywhere but Quasar. And then that's it. So it was a weird time. It really was. It was just, there were a lot of cool Avengers, but nothing, as you said, stuck. And Spider-Man's riding along with them for a minute and then leaves. Yeah. And it just felt like a very weird, unstable time.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm trying to think of what other books he was editing. So he would have probably been on the Iron Man book as well.
Sure, it would have been
the Thor book,
Thor. And that's when Thor was, when Thunderstrike was Thor, would have been some part of that era.
Right.
Would have been
and that strikes me as odd because there's a certain retro sensibility for Thor and then Thunderstrike that, I don't know. It pardon me, but it seems very un-Grunwaldian, right?
But he used what he had. He gets Eric Larson, Thunderstrike in there a few times in the comics. We're going to try to make this work, and it's hard to. Yeah, I guess it's anti-Grunwaldian to introduce brand new characters out of nowhere, to replace somebody. He does that, but that's not out of nowhere. We've known John Walker for a while before he steps into those shoes. But there were so many different things, and Gruenwald was aware of the importance of trying to sell books. So he was probably going to be willing to okay things. There were the two things that you can never do in Marvel during that era: was bring back Bucky and bring back Uncle Ben. And so you can't do that. But everything else seemed possible, and there were a lot of things that had to try, and the Avengers titles didn't sell as well, and so there were a lot of efforts to be made, even if they're not all Grunwaldian.
Yeah, we're totally going to start using that term now.
Yes, you got to copyright that.
So we've talked a lot about Gruenwald's influence on the book, but I mean, he worked with some stellar artists too throughout his 10-year tenure on the book. I'm particularly
I feel like he could have pushed to get some more like flashier, like superstar artists, quote unquote, and that maybe would have raised the profile for Captain America a little bit higher. I mean, I guess you could argue that when Ron Lim was on the book, he was kind of a superstar artist at the time.
Yeah.
But people like Kyron Dwyer and Rick Levins, like they weren't like big, huge name. I mean, they were amazing artists, but they weren't like big, like superstar artists, like an Eric Larson or a Jim Lee or a Mark Silvestri. And I always thought that if Mark Gruenwald had pushed for somebody like that, then maybe it would have raised the profile, but it wouldn't have fit.
Then we get Heroes Reborn, Justin, and that's
that's what I'm talking about. Like that's what I mean. When you get a perfect example of a superstar artist who does a rendition of Captain America, and it's totally wrong, like it doesn't work. But then you get these, and that's another thing that I love about Mark Gruenwald's run is that he has some great artists that he works with, like Paul Neary and Kyron Dwyer and all these people that are legends in their own right, but don't have the same recognition as some of the other talent. I really like that because their renditions are all amazing of Captain America.
Yeah,
they're all good.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So what artists were you kind of drawn to on Cap, Jason?
Uh-oh.
I can't hear you.
Did you mute? We can't hear you. Uh-oh.
Oop.
Uh-oh.
Nope.
Yeah,
I blame Phil.
Okay.
I blame Phil.
I was gonna say it looks good on our end. So did a wire come out?
Okay, now he's muted. Now he's not.
We can't
Did you put him on double? Did you put him on double secret mute, Phil?
No.
Could be StreamYard being.
Maybe. Unless you try to come out and come back in, Jason. I don't know.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be StreamYard.
Yeah, you want to try hopping out and then hopping back in, maybe?
Yeah.
Phil, you think that'll work?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. I'll keep my fingers crossed.
Yeah, that seems to work for whenever I have issues with that.
Damn StreamYard.
No.
Nope.
Nothing. You might have to leave the room and come back in.
Yeah.
Yeah. There we go.
All right, Justin, who's your avatar there, dude?
That's him.
That's me.
That's you.
That's not sexy Charles Xavier. That's him.
Phil had that commission just for me.
Nice.
I mean, yes, that fancy French artist AI.
A1.
All right, let's see. I'll let them back in. We'll see.
Fingers are still crossed.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
There we
yes!
go.
What happened? I didn't do anything.
Might be StreamYard. Sometimes
It could be StreamYard.
Let's blame them because I was just listening, hands in my lap.
I think it was the red. I think it was the Red Skull.
Yeah.
Probably.
Or Maelstrom.
No.
always
We got jokes for next time. Well,
Yeah. Okay. Whatever.
yeah. I mean, there's so much like stuff from Mark's run that like you didn't even get to all of it. Like I don't think you even mentioned Superior Stratagem.
I didn't. I had a chapter that I was going to include, and then I ended up taking out that dealt a little bit with that storyline and talked about like metamorphoses, and with the Man and Wolf storyline in that one, and the teenage one that we talked about earlier. But I had a lot of content, and eventually we kind of had to work some stuff out. So I ended up taking that one out. But I did write a chapter that dealt with it at least a little bit, with the idea of physical changes and how even when there are physical changes taking place, Steve Rogers is always Steve Rogers. Even when he's a wolf, he's still Steve Rogers.
Cap Wolf. Anyway, the question that I asked earlier was about artists. So who are you particularly drawn to
we mentioned artists? Paul Neary, and and I love that work. I'm an I don't know if I'm an interesting person or just a strange one, but I'm always more drawn to the writers than the artists. And so there are titles in which people will say, like, I don't even know how you can read that. The art's so bad. Yeah, but the story's good. And so I've always been sort of an odd case in a visual media like comics, to be less drawn to the artists than I am the storytellers of the words. Obviously, the artists are storytellers too. But so I I'm always willing to give a comic a chance if I like the words.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think? Do you guys think? I mean, is it fair to say like Mark's writing was so strong that it could? I don't think he had a bad artist, but if he did have a not as great artist, that it could have kind of pushed it through just from the strength of his writing.
Mm-hmm.
I would say so. By the end of the run, the artists, if they're not bad, they're very 90s. And so, there's maybe some adjustments that take place between the beginning of the run and the end. But Mark valued collaboration so much. And, to answer our earlier question about why he didn't necessarily push for superstar artists, maybe he wanted that sort of maybe more toned down style that would collaborate more with his writing approach than something that would be a little flashy in those eras.
And again, like you put in the beginning of the book, like was it this book or the Quasar book? But he was like, what got Mark in the comics, believe it or not, was old Justice League. So it's like, I think he had like some Silver Age tastes in
absolutely
stories. Yeah, so
yeah, that's in the Quasar.
And I've actually heard Quasar described as a Silver Age hero in Marvel Earth, of the 80s and 90s, which I think works a lot. And then Cap is this classic hero who he's, I think Gruenwald changes him as much as he can over the run. Obviously, you can't get too crazy because Captain America is Captain America, right?
Exactly.
But he does move him along. I would also say that I don't think Gruenwald's writing was flashy, right? I mean, he's not someone like Claremont who you can recognize right immediately, right? It's gonna be a good. I think he called himself a structuralist.
Yep.
I think that was in your Quasar book, and I can see that because he puts it together and it works. It all the gears and everything works together, but it isn't flashy. It's just workmanship and craftsmanship.
And those are a lot of the artists he worked with were valued craftsmanship. They were really good artists who were able to tell a functional story with the images in the way that he was. And I think that is probably part of those collaborations. And I think there was a traditional aspect to Captain America. I agree with what you said about him not really being able to have the liberties to play around with Steve Rogers as a character. He still does a lot of pretty bold things. We've already talked about John Walker, and there's the armor at the end. And so he's willing to shake things up, including Cap's very health at the end. But there's only so much you can do with that title.
Yeah. Well, and it ends. And when we mentioned Quasar, both of his runs end on very much a down note.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's, and I would say that's probably, I think we can assume that was Gruenwald's state of mind at that point. I mean, I don't think that's too far fetched to say that, this coming to an end was not the end that he wanted for either book, and I think you can see that in the way that they end.
I think so. I think both of them are so somber and walking very slowly into the sunset in both cases. There's a glimmer of hope, I think, at the end of the Captain America one. We know that there's going to be a new writer in the next issue. We know that. And so I think there's a little bit of hope. There's none in Quasar. I mean, none whatsoever. It's as downbeat an ending as you could ever get for a hero that does live at the end of it, but in what way?
Like that last Cap issue, like I think maybe he wanted to do a somber tone, but also it's basically Cap disappears, so it's basically Mark Waid comes in, he can insert him however he wants.
He was giving Waid kind of the freedom to not have to connect all the dots continuity wise that he did. So that ending is like, do whatever you want. It's fine. I'm done. And I think his heart was broken that he had to leave those titles. He didn't want to on either one. And so, and then we talked about the Heroes Reborn and stuff after that. And he was really depressed about all of that stuff that was going on at that point, because Marvel was something he put so much into, and that title, Captain America, was something he put so much into, and that just wasn't his anymore.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, and you can see his fingerprints on so much of Marvel throughout the late 70s and throughout the 80s. I know one of Phil's and I we love Project Pegasus, which is just a great little multi-part story that just worked. I mean, George Perez art in places, but of course Quasar because Phil and I. But I mean,
Sure.
And then the handbook, multiple editions of the handbook. I'm a fan of that Hawkeye miniseries.
I love the Hawkeye series. Yeah.
There's just so much work he did to make the Marvel Universe a much more interesting and connected experience, I think,
yes,
than anybody else.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of saying it. And he put himself 100% into every project. That's why it was so hard for him when he had to leave. This goes back to Spider-Woman, which was one of the first titles that he was the lead writer on. They took him off that, and he was crushed. And he was doing good work on that title too. And it was just always hard for him because it all meant so much.
Oh, and he's also, I've talked to other people from like the 90s, like he was always like willing to help people and give them advice on, like on the writing and, whatever they needed creatively and stuff. And the funniest story I heard, I think we did an episode after Jim Shooter passed. We were talking to DG Chichester and Greg Wright.
Oh, cool.
And they were saying, I think Greg Wright was saying how Shooter would try to intimidate people sometimes just with his height because he was a very tall man. I guess Mark built a platform. I don't know if he was working on this platform. So so that way Shooter wasn't able to just tower over him. He actually
had to look him in the eye. Yeah.
And he would keep, I guess, artwork and stuff in this little platform. But he was like, no, Shooter, you're gonna look me in the eye.
I love that.
That's great. Yeah, he was just a fascinating writer who just did so many things. And he was looking out for the assistant editors and the people that he was working with in pretty profound ways. And I was talking to Kat Schuler Gruenwald, his widow, and she talked about how he was seeing the evolution of the field, that he knew things were changing in the mid-90s, and he started taking screenwriting classes. And he also was paying for other people to take screenwriting classes because he knew that this was something that we needed, that comics were kind of evolving into, which he's right. And so he saw the writing on the wall and cared so much about the people that he was working with.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I think someone was telling me I don't know if he gave talks or classes or something. I was just like, tell me there's audio of that, but I don't think there was. So, yeah, I know.
Yeah. So, we look at the 10 years on the title. In 10 years, that's more than 120 issues because of those summer bi-weekly issues that he did. Right. So we're talking just an enormous number of issues, right?
Doesn't it come out to 137 or 138? Oh yeah, that doesn't even count annuals and stuff.
Yeah, annuals. We did all those too, I think.
Yeah. Wow. There's one he didn't do.
Yeah, the regular
one he didn't do, and I think it's really telling. I think it's a Roy Thomas issue, and I think the one he didn't do was a flashback to World War II, which is really interesting to me because he gets, we talked about earlier, that dramatic look back at World War II, and then we don't do anything with that again, which is also a fascinating thing for that long a run, that it's all very, very modern in that era, and we don't really tread back to that. And even when the Skull comes back, he's a very 80s 90s villain, and that was something that really mattered to him, is you didn't get a callback to a lot of those Nazi villains that were still staples in the 60s and 70s, and he was moving everything in a more modern way.
Well, is there, it seems to me that, I don't know, maybe this is just my opinion, but aside from John Walker as U.S. agent, Marvel seems to have forgotten, or doesn't necessarily go back and utilize a lot of stuff from that run, even though it's so rich, right? I mean, with everything that he did.
Will wants to see Brother Nature, okay? That's what he's saying.
Preach, Phil. I mean, let's do it.
Is there... I would hope that this would have more effect on present-day Captain America than it obviously does, I guess, is what I'm trying to struggle to say here.
I think that's actually a really profound point, Will. And I think part of it is, as we said, the sales were low for the Avengers titles. Captain America was in danger of being canceled at various points, before Mark's run and even during it at times. And then this weird thing happened by the 2000s, is that Captain America became the most popular comic, one of the best sellers under Brubaker, and just astonishing that would happen when we're thinking back to Brother Nature and some of the characters that we see, that this would one day be the most popular comic. And so I think that Marvel, comic-wise, has really clung to that. And so that template is one that we see a little bit more of. Cap as soldier as opposed to Cap as superhero, which is very much the way that Mark depicts him. That being said, I think the MCU version of Steve Rogers owes a lot to Mark. I feel like we see a lot of that superhero, the morality of the character. A character who's a man out of time but isn't a fool. And I think that was a really important part of what Mark did. Mark wanted Captain America, Steve Rogers, to feel like somebody who understood the world he was in. And I think in the MCU, we do that too, where Steve's got the list of things that he needs to do. He isn't the guy that just wants to listen to the big bands and stuff. He wants to find Marvin Gaye and see the things that have really mattered. And so I think that feels like something that's relevant in the MCU. So I think Mark's always there. I think the imprint is always there. You're not wrong, Will, that there isn't as much of it as I'd like. But I still think that there's stuff that has happened over the last decades that Mark would have still really liked. Because I think there are a few writers that infused humor into Captain America over the years and did some things that were similar to him.
I think if nothing else, he would have been curious to be like, oh, how did that go? You brought Bucky back.
Yeah. Oh, I would be so fascinated. It's such a darker tale than anything he did. I would be curious as to how he would view it. But under Brubaker, Steve is still Steve. Steve's he's willing to let other people do the shooting for him. But he's still Steve under all of it. But that was already happening with Wade and Sharon a bit at that point too. So it was a very natural transition from I think Wade's storytelling, which is still the superhero, but kind of veering into the super soldier stuff, and then what we get from Brubaker.
And Mark's run was very grounded. Like Mark Waid jumps in. I mean, we're dealing with cosmic cubes, Korvac comes back at some point. So going way out there.
Well, then he got to scratch that itch with Quasar, because I think he wanted to do some of that super weird stuff, but he knew that Captain America wasn't the playground. And that's why he kind of needed to do Quasar, because then he could do some crazy stuff that I think he very clearly wanted to do, but Cap wasn't the title to get away with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Any other questions, boys, or should we cut it there?
I think we're good. Yeah.
I think we're good.
Because again, next episode, Jason will be back, as long as he's not sick of us. Yes, we're going to talk about the Quasar book.
Be prepared to talk about that for hours and hours.
Oh yeah,
I'm excited to do it.
I think Will liked Mark's Cap run. Oh, wait till we get the Quasar.
Let's go. I'll try to match you. Fanboy for fanboy.
Okay. All right.
I meant to put this up. I didn't. Yes, kids, you can go get there. There's the Captain America book. Mark Gruenwald stars Spangled Symbolism of Captain America, and you can get that. I know it's on Amazon. You can go to the publisher, right, McFarlane.
Yep.
So
wherever you can get it. I'm proud of this book. I love looking at the cover. Just a good cover. And I love getting to talk about it. So thank you for giving me that platform tonight, friends.
Hey, no problem.
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you.
We love talking too, but yeah, that is a great cover.
Totally. Love it.
I was very happy when I saw it. My mom, when she saw it, it's like, don't you think he's too broad? I'm like, Mom, it's fine. Don't question this.
No.
I think it's great.
not going to mess with it. It's
You
perfect.
should see some of the depictions of Captain America on the page. He's occasionally a little muscly.
I thought we weren't going to talk about Rob Liefeld.
You're the one who keeps bringing him up.
I know. That's a cautionary tale. Rob Liefeld. All right, Jason, thank you for joining us. Is there anything else you want to promote beyond the books?
No, I think this is great. I'm going to be going to FanX in Salt Lake City this coming week to be part of a panel in Captain America and then another panel about the Thunderbolts movie. So I'm excited. I get to meet a lot of like-minded people this week and have some fun with that.
Oh, nice. All right, so yeah, go out, get this Captain America book, and again, go get the Quasar books. We're gonna be talking about that in a few days. All right, Jason, thank you so much. Yes, there's the
hold it up again, Will. Let me see
Okay.
it, because you notice the quantum bands on there. If you go on the McFarlane site, they don't have the quantum bands.
yes,
really?
And so maybe one of the nerdiest conversations I've ever had to have was with the design team at McFarlane, discussing the differences between the quantum bands and the nega bands.
Oh,
Yes.
and
Awesome.
And they were wonderful. And he changed it right away. And it's still, I think on the McFarlane site, I think it might still have the nega bands, but I was so happy when I got to see the cover with the proper quantum bands on it.
Quantum bands.
I know. I think I saw that one first. The one with she looks at the nega band. I'm like, oh man, is there like a rights thing or something? Then I saw the quantum band.
Well, I kind of liked it that they put that one out there, and I had some discussions about the cover prior, but that was, it wasn't a sticking point. It was just when I brought it up, they changed it. But I like the idea. So you can see the cover with the wrong bands on it, but then you get it and you see it the right way. It's like, oh, it's like
Nice surprise.
Yeah, the diehards will understand what's changed here.
All right, Jason. Again, thank you so much. We love talking.
You.
Again,
Yes.
three of us love talking to Mark Gruenwald. So
Definitely.
yes, and we'll all come back here in a few days and talk some Quasar. Mark's Quasar.
All right. Yeah.
Sounds great. I will be in an Airbnb on Wednesday night. I'll be heading up to Salt Lake City for that convention, and I will be. Hopefully, there'll be a nice room that I can kind of hide in for a while. We'll see what my backdrop is. It will be less quirky, I'm assuming, on Wednesday. But hopefully, we'll have everything to the proper accommodations to make that work.
All
right. Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Jason.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.